Good afternoon, colleagues, and good afternoon to all the participants, and good afternoon to you again, Dr. Jouet. Just a note, just a disclaimer that this workshop is being recorded. Welcome to the Research Capacity Development Unit at the University of Johannesburg Postgraduate School. My name is Lawrence, and I will be your moderator for today's workshop. I'd like to start off by thanking all the attendees for taking their time to join, and most importantly, our facilitator, Dr. Jubet, for accepting to facilitate this workshop on thesis format and submission procedure from the Faculty of Law. Really appreciate your support there for honoring our invite, Dr. Jobet. Before I introduce Dr. Jobet, or before I read over her bio, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping rules. If you do have any question during the session, please kindly raise your virtual hand and I will indicate to the presenter. But if you do not wish to speak, please kindly type your question in the chat box and I will present it to the presenter. The session is being recorded, as I have indicated, and the session will be posted, the recording of this session will be posted on our model communities together with the presentation slides that we will request from Dr. Jubet. And also please note that I will be posting a feedback survey in the chat session. So kindly please fill this in because we use it for our reporting purposes. And we will also send it out to our facilitator, Dr. Jubet, for her reporting purposes as well. So before we can begin the session, please allow me to read over Dr. Jubet's bio at your hearing. Dr. Jubet is a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg in the Department of Procedural Law. She was appointed to the faculty in 2014. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in English and Law, as well as a Bachelor of Laws degree, which she obtained at Wits University. She also holds a Master's of Laws degree in Commercial Law, which she obtained with a cum laude. She obtained the prize for Best Student in Insolvency Law during her master's degree. Dr. Jubed has completed her doctoral studies in procedural law at the University of Johannesburg, and the topic of her dissertation was judicial case management as a tool to improve efficiency in the pre-trial process in civil trials. Dr. Jubed is an admitted attorney and practiced as a litigation attorney for 15 years, during which she pursued and defended claims for personal injury damages in both senior and junior courts. She also contributed to textbook Fundamentals Principles of the Civil Procedure, fourth edition by Theophilosophes et al. She is the chairperson of the Law Faculty Teaching and Learning Committee. Dr. Jubert areas of interest include intellectual insolvency, procedural, and constitutional law. Her professional philosophy is that one must keep learning and acquiring new skills in order to remain relevant in the workplace and community. Her personal motivation is that challenges reviews opportunity for growth that may otherwise remain untapped. Without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Jovet. Dr. Jovet, you may go ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lawrence, for that lovely introduction, and thank you to the postgrad development that you have given me this opportunity to address the students. So I would like to share my slides. I just want to
Yes, I've stopped sharing.
See if that is going to do that for me. Can anybody see the slides?
Yes, we can see your slides, but they're not in presenter mode yet.
Okay, I need to then, yes. Hopefully that's better.
Yes, that's perfect. You can now see them in presenter mode. Dr. Juba, just a question. Would you like to answer question during the session or you like the questions at the end of the session?
I don't mind during the session. Yeah, like you can interrupt me if there's a question, that's no problem.
Okay, not a problem. I will be monitoring the chats and all the hands as well. Then I will notify you.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. All right. Thank you for those who are attending. The title of this workshop is Faculty of Law, so specifically the law faculty, thesis format submission procedure, and as you know, I'm sure I've taught some of you civil procedure. I'm Dr. Yvette Joubert. So the purpose of this session and how I approached it is to give you some peace of mind and some idea of how the whole process works. It is not made up as one goes along. Sometimes, as a student, you think, I'm sure they're making this up as they go along. But obviously, that is not how it happens. It all comes from the UJ policy, so not just the law faculty, the whole university. And UJ has, as any university has, their policies on higher degrees. So the ones specifically that are relevant to us are the higher degrees policy, the higher degrees administration policy, and then the academic regulations 2025. So you'll see in my slides, I do refer to these policies. Well, I have extracts from the policies, but I also have notes. You'll see them in red, and you'll see it's notes on whatever. Those are not taken from the policies. Those are just notes that I'm making and that I'll give to you. But those then are the policies. The parties that are involved and that are set out and identified in these policies, if you start at the top, it's top down here. It's the Senate Higher Degrees Committee, the SHDC, and this committee advises Senate, who's obviously at the top of the university structure, on higher degree related matters. So anything post-grad is higher degree related matters. There's a deputy vice chancellor research that is responsible for provision of research support and institutional level responsibilities. And we also have an executive director for research and innovation division that is vacant at the moment, but probably in the process of being filled. But there is such a position and is usually filled. So when it comes closer to us in the faculty, the law faculty has a higher degrees committee, so it's the FHDC, and this committee will take all the decisions based on your theses and your dissertations, etc. Then you have obviously the dean, so the executive dean's office. And you know that we have an acting dean at the moment, Prof. van der Linde, but we do have an executive dean that's been appointed, and that will start in September, from the 1st of September, and that's Prof. Charles Maimela from UP. And but in any event, it's the dean's office. Then the vice dean research, who's Prof. Janita Karlitz, and she asked me to just mention that she has an open door policy. So if there are questions that I can't answer, you're most welcome to address them to her. And then probably your go-to person, and the person you should make friends with, is Temba Kazi. So the faculty officer, the admin officer in the faculty that deals with the postgrad students. Allocation of responsibilities, this comes from the policies. There's a clear separation of responsibilities between the students, the supervisors, the faculties, the office of the DVC, the registrar, etc. So it's all set out in the policies how it works, and no one just goes on a little frolic of their own. It's all regulated, and the purpose is to make sure that it's all fair and all the students are dealt with on an equal basis, and they are not in any way prejudiced. So for most operational purposes, the point of conduct for you as postgrad students are your supervisors, the academic department. So if you're doing your corporate law, it's going to be that department, the HOD of that department, and then the law faculty. So it's unlikely that you will ever need to speak to anybody from Senate, etc. It's not necessary. So the UJ Postgraduate School, who organized this workshop in collaboration with the faculties, and other related UJ support functions supports UJ postgrad students, which you know. So that is also your go-to um, place. The Office of the Deputy Vice Chancellor, etc., the higher degree, the Senate Higher Degrees Committee, etc., they oversee and administer the process across the whole of the institution. If you have any student complaints, you don't get on with your supervisor, or your supervisor says that your thesis is not, your minor thesis is not ready for submission, and you think it's ready for submission and you can't resolve it just by discussion, etc. There is a complaints provision, and there's a policy. There's always a policy. You just have to find it. Policy is called Policy on Handling of Student Complaints, and the usual chain is you go to the HOD first of that department, then the Vice Dean Research, Prof. Carlitz, then the Executive Dean, now Prof. van der Linde, or the new Dean, and then the Postgraduate School, and if necessary, and it still can't be resolved, the Postgraduate School will refer it to the Senate Higher Degrees Committee. But this is extraordinary. Obviously not just every little thing that you're unhappy with, you're going to take through that whole process. These are serious issues that would land up at the Senate Higher Degrees Committee. If you are doing a doctorate, I don't know whether you're doing, if there's anybody doing doctorates on here, but the scope of the doctorate is set out in the policies, and I did include it here, even if there are no doctoral students here, is to show the difference between the expectation for the doctorate and that for the master's. So the doctorate requires mastery of a subject at a very high academic level. It's self-directed research, which is the same as master's, but it requires the candidate to undertake research at the most advanced academic level. And then that second block shows that the doctoral thesis requires an original contribution to the body of knowledge, whereas the master's does not as such. It's not a huge requirement. It's not an essential requirement for masters to have an original contribution. So you don't have to worry and go and not sleep at night because you think I'm just rehashing what's out there. I don't have anything original in my thesis. At master's level, it's not essential that you bring something new to the literature that's already there. So first of all, the types of master's degrees, the research master's degree. So you only have the dissertation, there's no coursework. And then the other one, which you see on the right-hand side, coursework master's degrees, for which the minor dissertation is normally a 50% of the requirements of the degree. So 90 points out of a total of 180 credit points. So half of your marks will come from your minor dissertation. So it's worthwhile spending time and effort on it. Sorry, before I move on to that slide, you may, if you look at UJ policies, or you may, if you speak to other students from other universities, hear about something about a master's by submitting articles, and that you do 4 articles, for instance, of 20,000 words each, or whatever the case, or 5,000 words, whatever the case may be. But it is in the policies as it stands, but these policies are under revision. They being looked at, and it's not something that the law faculty as such focuses on. So that's why I didn't even include it. So the scope of the master's, remember 2 slides ago, I said the doctoral student must show original thought and original conclusions, whereas the scope of the coursework master's, and this is from the policies that I've taken it, so I'm not saying you must dumb down your master's studies, I'm just saying what the requirements are. A course's master's degree equips the student with specialized knowledge of the field and field-appropriate methodologies. Remember, these policies are also written across the whole of UJ. So they for science students, humanities, engineering, etc. So, field appropriate methodologies may include lab work or whatever. Um, so it utilizes both coursework and a self-directed research project. I highlighted it myself. All the red is my own highlighting. It's not from the policies, but to just bring home that any sort of postgrad research, whether it's a minor thesis, a research thesis, or doctoral studies, if you carry on with that, it is basically you by yourself doing it. Really, it is. Yes, you have your supervisor that will guide you and direct you and inspire you, etc. But it's ultimately something that comes from you, and no one's going to write it for you. So it stands there in the policy. Even the master's is a self-directed research project. Um, as a pedagogical vehicle. So it's not a coursework, it is a research project. The student is not generally expected to make an original theoretical or fundamental contribution to the field of knowledge. Again, I highlight that because I want to set your minds at ease. You're not expected at this level to come up with something brand new, to come up with something totally, unheard of, magical, whatever. If you can, that would be fantastic. But it's not necessary to pass or even to get a good mark. The last point brings this home. It says the student is required to demonstrate proficiency in research methods. That is the biggest thing at this level, and the ability to apply these methods and to work independently. So when your piece of work is being assessed, they want to know, are you able to find the resources, identify which sources are relevant, filter through them, and find the sources that are support your argument, or even if they don't support your argument, you say these sources don't support my argument, but I disagree with them for this or other reason, or you try and balance them out. And you mustn't think that the less footnotes you have, the more original your work is. No, the more footnotes you have, the better you demonstrate that you researched everything and that you can motivate all your statements and that you're not just making this up. Everything is in the sources. So here I have notes on minor dissertation. So when I say notes on my slides, these do not come from the policies. But just to elaborate, although an original contribution is always desirable, it is not an essential requirement for master studies. It is, however, for doctoral studies. Excuse me, but the student must show at master's levels, a thorough knowledge of the subject chosen, mastered competent research techniques, independent thought and sound reasoning. It must make sense, and a satisfactory presentation of results. It's set out properly in an academic way, etc. So the minor dissertation is mostly the student's unaided effort, and the length, usually one looks at a doctorate, perhaps 50,000, and a master's 20,000 words. But the law faculty for mini dissertations advises 8,000 to 10,000 words. That includes the footnotes and it excludes the bibliography. You can go over, it's not cast in stone. You will have difficulty in going under. I find most students write too much at the end of the day rather than too little, because once you get going, there's so much out there that you can add. So this is the guideline. Scope of coursework masters, this is again from the policies. So the core output of the research component is a minor dissertation if it's coursework. With the dissertation, it's in the form of a written document, obviously in an appropriate format, reporting on the various aspects of the research project. It normally accounts for 50%, we saw that, of the credits for the degree, and is more limited in scope than a full research master's dissertation. So if you have no coursework at all and the only thing you're doing for your master's is a full dissertation, that is different to the mini one. But both of them have the same standards of academic rigor. The master's student is responsible for the technical and linguistic editing of the dissertation, with the assistance of the supervisor prior to submission. But your supervisor is not going to edit your work for you, and it's not one of their duties. So you need to edit your own work. If you know it's not one of your strong points, then you will need to send it off to editing for editing, or you can go to the UJ Writing Center. I'm sure there's a postgrad writing center, but make sure that you have resources to present something that is professionally set out. It doesn't have to be faultless, you're aiming for faultless, but it must be in an acceptable format. So, not spelling errors, grammatical errors, syntax errors, the footnotes don't follow the TSAR reference, etc., etc. And it is the student's responsibility at the end of the day. You can't submit something that looks like a dog's breakfast to your supervisor and expect for it to come back beautifully edited. No, your supervisor is not an editor. So students are encouraged to publish articles based on their master's research. This, again, don't stress about it. You don't have to do it. And it doesn't happen that often. But if you feel that you're a person that wants to publish things, just make sure that you must first obtain written permission from your supervisor if you're going to send anything to be published that comes from your master's research. The supervisors may take the initiative to publish it. So it's in the policy, but this is not a requirement, please. So it's not a requirement. It's just in the policy to cover that's eventuality, and also to make the point that the student must get the permission from the supervisor. And then you should show mastery of the subject at a reasonably high level. I mean, this is not being insulting in any way. It's just to make a distinction between your doctorate, which I've gone back to, and you can see mastery of the subject at a very high level, and your master's work, which is a reasonably high level, which is still obviously high. It's still a high requirement, but don't stress yourself that you have to produce work that is at doctorate level. Again, notes that I've included. Notes on appointment of a supervisor. How does that happen? You have to have a supervisor. You can't work without one. You can approach a member of staff or the head of the course and discuss, does he or she know of anyone? Or you can go to a staff member if you know they are an expert on their field, and you can ask, are you willing to supervise this? But if you don't know anyone or you haven't got any clue on how to start, don't stress. The head of the course, the head of the program will appoint a supervisor for you. So you will get a supervisor. But to supervise a master's degree, master's thesis, the supervisor needs him or herself to have a master's degree, and to supervise a doctorate, then the supervisor must have a doctorate. And obviously, the supervisor's knowledge must be in the same discipline. It doesn't help if you have a degree in engineering. You're not going to be able to supervise a law thesis. If you identify a supervisor, or you're very keen to have a supervisor, but that person is outside of UJ, the policy says you have to appoint a co-supervisor from UJ, but the faculty higher degree committee can exempt this if that person is very well known or is, acceptable on and complies with the UJ requirements, etc. But this is a process that will have to be followed. Also, if you have a clash, there's no way you can work with your supervisor. You can change the supervisor, but again, this must be approved by the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee. It doesn't, you can't just walk out one office and go into another. And mostly people get along with their supervisors. I mean, everyone tries their best, etc. So it's not something that happens often, but again, there are provisions should this happen. The choice of supervisor is important. That person needs to be academically competent and willing to supervise. It doesn't help if the person doesn't have time or really isn't interested in this part of academic life, to insist and to bully them into supervising your thesis because they're very knowledgeable. Or perhaps they just have so many they can't fit you in, so don't take it personally either. But the student must also feel comfortable to communicate with the supervisor, because obviously this is the person that you're going to rely on to assist you. So you need to feel comfortable with that person, not become best friends, but be able to work with him. The supervisor stimulates thoughts and encourages perseverance. The supervisor guides and inspires. So I just want to break here quickly and just mention to Lawrence, I can't see the chat box. I could only see my slides. So if there are questions, you must just please alert me to them. Thank
Yes,
you.
I will do. Yes.
The supervisor will usually discuss, and these again from notes, so I haven't extracted this from any policies, but usually when you go and see your supervisor for the first time, they will discuss things like frequency of contact, method of communication. Do you prefer email? Do you prefer in person? Do you prefer telephone calls, or perhaps even WhatsApp if the supervisor agrees to that, if that's your mode or your preferred mode? Deadlines may be set to say you need to submit, a third of your work by then, or half of your work by then, or chapter by chapter if you're doing it that way. Frequency of submission, monitoring and evaluation. How will this happen? You send me something and I'll do my best to get back to you within 5 days, etc. And then, importantly, the student supervisor agreement has to be signed. It's a requirement from UJ, so it's not a law faculty requirement only. And the student supervisor agreement, you see at the bottom of that slide, the second bullet, is a link to the agreement, but your supervisor will most probably send you the agreement, and then you read through it, you familiarize yourself with it. If there's anything in there that you don't understand or don't like, etc., you discuss it. But ultimately, it'll have to be signed by you and the supervisor. So a formal student supervisor agreement as outlined in the student supervisory relationship policy must be signed and adhered to for all doctoral students, research master students, coursework master students, registered for minor dissertation, and professional master students registered for investigative reports. The agreement should be signed once within a month of registration and stored electronically with the faculty. If you're outside your month of registration, don't stress, as long as it is something that once you get a supervisor appointed, will be forthcoming and that you will have to attend to. And it's not law specific, or it's not just you, it is a varsity-wide requirement. You'll also see from that link, it says there 2021, but it's been updated 2025, and the update includes that you must indicate, for instance, if your research touches any of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is in line with the university's strategic goals that have now. They're based on societal impact and sustainability, global footprint, and technology for the future. So there is a concerted effort on the part of the university to ensure that the research we do contributes or makes an impact on society. So, some more notes. The student is expected to devise a plan for writing the minor dissertation. Work it out for yourself. How's it going to work for you? Are you going to work 1 day a week? Are you going to work every day for a number of hours? If you work during the week, perhaps you'll set aside a day of your weekend to work on your dissertation, etc. This is something you will have to work out and fit in. You obviously have to adhere for deadlines regarding registration and submission. If you send your final draft late, it might be that will only be able to be submitted the following year, and then you might have to re-register if it's possible for you to re-register, etc. And it's just extra money and time, etc. But just be aware that there are time limits to when you submit. These time limits are not set by the university, so they're not set out in any policies. It's usually by the faculties, and usually you be told, please have at least something that looks like a final draft by the end of October, although if possible, if necessary, in November, we can still, look at it in the beginning of the year. Obviously, no one wants to work over December. Everyone's entitled to their break. And also, Timbakazi says she's not going to try and get someone to appoint assessors over December. And it's not because she's not willing, it's that no one is going to answer her emails if she sends theses to be assessed over December. People are going to say, please wait for January, etc. So if you leave it to the new year, you're playing, have a thin line, but beginning of February is the absolute last if you want to make the April graduation, and possibly July if you want to make the August graduation, etc. But this is determined by the faculty. But don't aim for the last possible date. You yourselves don't want to write in December, I'm sure. So try and get the bulk of it done by November latest. Right, so meet with the supervisor when a meeting is requested, whether it's on Teams or it's in person or whatever other way. Please give the supervisor some contact details so that he or she can get hold of you. If you are perhaps a student that goes home and home is not close, and whatever the case may be, the supervisor will need to be able to get hold of you to make sure that its progress is being made, etc. You need to be familiar with the faculty's rules and procedures, and very importantly, avoid plagiarism. There's a zero tolerance policy, and as you know, you'll have to submit your final draft through Turnitin. And also, if you are using AI to write your thesis, obviously people use AI, for different reasons, whatever. But if you are going to use AI injudiciously, in other words, AI is writing most of it, or your ideas are coming from AI or whatever, then that is going to be a problem. And if you found out, you are not going to be able to get your degree. So also be careful when you use AI. It's not just a free tool. It is free in the sense that you don't pay for it, but you do pay for it in some way, because remember, you have to upload stuff to AI. And what you're uploading is the crux of it. You're uploading your own thoughts or your own research, etc. And now, you might lose your intellectual property over that. If you were in practice and you are an attorney or advocate, etc., and you upload stuff, and we're thinking of those cases, Mavundla and Northbound, etc., where counsel and article clerks, where they upload things, this is hugely problematic because these are clients' details and privileged information, etc. So don't think about it when you use AI. Use it cleverly so that it's not you're not losing out on the deal. You're not getting it more than you're getting out there, because if you give all your information in, um, I don't think it's a good idea. But anyway, I hope I'm speaking to the converted. If, and I mentioned this before, if English is perhaps not your first language, it's your second or third language or whatever, or you are not a strong writer, not everyone has the same skills, or you really struggle with writing, please go to one of the writing centers. Please ask their assistance so that you can express your thoughts clearly. You don't want to be marked down because of your presentation. If you have incomplete research and whatever, that's one thing. But if you have good research and good thoughts and you have a good thematic outline, but the person is getting irritated reading it, the assessor, because it's full of spelling errors, or it's full of grammatical errors, or it's the paragraphs don't make sense, or whatever, then that's a pity, because you're going to be marked down unnecessarily. You are just throwing marks away, so it's worthwhile spending time on that. The supervisor in turn is expected to guide the student in getting a research topic. It doesn't mean giving the student the research topic. Choose something that you really are interested in within your studies. Establishing with the student a timetable for completion, giving feedback as soon as possible. Ensure that the student has goodness me, it should be has an understanding of what they write about. So do they understand this case that they're quoting? Are they quoting it correctly? Are they using it in the right context? Are they interpreting the law correctly, etc.? So that is what supervisors definitely are supposed to do. They must also be accessible. It doesn't mean they must be accessible 24/7, but they must come back to you within a reasonable time, and they must be available to have meetings, etc. They might not all have an open door policy, so you can't just burst in whenever, but and they might not give you their private cell phone number or whatever, but they must at least be accessible to discuss your work. There's no standard deadline for submissions of proposals or drafts or final papers. Each supervisor determines the submission deadlines. Failure to adhere to deadlines may result in your work having to be submitted the following year. And I did mention you may have to re-register if it's too late. So there's two graduation sessions. There's an April one and an August one. There aren't any other graduation sessions. So if you're too late to make one of those sessions, and remember, I started out by saying these things have to go through the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee and be accepted, etc. So it goes through a process first. You can't just give it in today if the graduation is tomorrow. It's not going to work. The faculty needs time to process and come to an agreement, and then it gets submitted to Senate Higher Degrees, etc., etc. So all those policies take time. So the contact phase, this is again taken from the policy. Master students have 6 months and doctoral students 9 months to complete their research proposals to the standards required by the faculty. So these are proposals, the proposal that has to be accepted by the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee. The study field, the title, the supervisors and the assessors for coursework are all approved by the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee. So the title, the assessors, when they're appointed, you don't have to appoint assessors. That's something the supervisor and the faculty officer sees to. If we can't get a supervisor, an assessor, then the HOD will assist whatever. Assessors will be appointed, but this is all overseen by the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee. It's noted by the Senate Higher Degrees Committee. So once decisions be made, Senate will note it. It all goes down into on record. The first requirement that you will have to do, whether you are a doctoral student or master student, is to develop your proposal, and hopefully you are already on your way with doing that. This identifies an area of research. You get a document, and I don't know whether you have been given it, but there is a document out there from the law faculty that discusses research proposals. This contact phase is from the policy. It says research proposals are approved by faculty in terms of quality and the research ethics requirement. So when they say research ethics, it probably means if you're going to do empirical research or quantitative research where you go out and do questionnaires, or you speak to students, or you speak to people, or if it's in the health services and you speak to patients or children or whatever there's you need ethical clearance for that. So usually law students don't do empirical research. They do something called desktop research or literature reviews, etc. So but in any event, the faculty, the proposal will be accepted by the faculty. It's scrutinized at departmental level. So if a faculty hierarchies committee has a meeting and they go through all the proposals and they accept or not, they may make suggestions. They may say, no, this is too wide, this title, or this doesn't really have enough meat in it to have a master's minor dissertation written on it, or this is so boring, this has been done 100 times, or whatever the case may be. So a student may have to defend in person in front of a committee in the home department, so in the law faculty, or whatever their proposal. That doesn't happen often, really, don't stress about it, but it's there in the policy if needs be. If the proposal is not approved by the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee, the student may rework it, but the proposal says it can only be submitted one more time. If the proposal on resubmission is not approved, the student's registration is terminated. That's very mean, I'd say. So luckily it does say there, unless permission is granted to continue by the HOD or the executive dean. So there is an out, and it's not in our aims and missions to deregister students. So, but it is up to the faculty. You can't obviously keep on submitting proposals. There's no time for that. So changes to the title or to the supervisors or the assessors all have to be approved by the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee. And once it's been approved, it'll be noted, go on record at the Senate Higher Degrees Committee. The proposal must show that the candidate has identified an area of academic research that is appropriate to the LLD or LLM. The candidate demonstrates an ability to conduct research and to engage in scholarly writing, including knowledge of relevant literature, the ability to identify research questions, understanding of the methodology, and an ability to argue and write in a scholarly manner. So the proposal will show that you are starting out on a valid footing, and that it looks like you know what you're talking about. You've chosen a good area of law. It's something that one can write about. It's topical. It's perhaps controversial. It's perhaps there's a new case. You can do a case study on just one case, but obviously you will have to do more than just describe the case. You would have to put it in context of other cases and other developments, and etc., etc. But your proposal must already show that you at least know the literature at the moment, what's out there. What is the relevant textbooks in this area? What is the most important legal framework? What laws are there out there dealing with this area? What is your research question? You might have one big question and then some smaller ones that come from that, and then you would organize your thoughts and say, what's the most important thing to focus on? These other questions are there, but they're perhaps not as meaningful to your study as this one research question. Your methodology, how you're going to do this, it's usually a desktop study. It's usually, we have very few quantitative, so going out and getting data kind of studies. And in the minor dissertation, there's actually not the time to do that because you have to analyze your data when you get it back, etc. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. Data studies are very good, but it's not something that we usually have for minor dissertations. Even for doctorates in the law faculty, not that many. But you definitely have to show an ability to argue and write in a scholarly manner. You have to show this in your proposal already. The structure, and this is taken, these, I think, a couple of slides, 2, 3 slides that follows, is taken verbatim, cut and paste from
Sorry,
that
Doc.
document I was talking about that the law faculty has. You could ask Tim Bakazi for it.
Sorry, Doc. Can you hear
It,
me?
sorry, yes.
Yes. Sorry, I just want to interject that there is a few questions in the chat box. I don't know if you want to address them now or we can
Okay,
address
let
them.
me go. I'm going to then go back to there and just open my chat box. There. It's
Yes.
taking some time to open.
Okay. Do
Um,
you want me to read it
yeah,
out for
all
you?
right. Okay, let's see. Um,
There's one.
mentioned I'm reading here. I remember you mentioned it there in your personal notes and not the content of the policy. And notice one of the red notes in length of the LLD is 50,000. Summary I understood to be 80,000. It's not specifically prescribed in either. Actually, no. I looked at it. The two documents, the policy document, higher degree policy, and the higher degree administration, and I couldn't find an actual word limit. But again, this is something you can discuss with your supervisor, and I know that my own one was like 70 something thousand. So there's not a prescription as such, as long as it's not too short and not too long. I mean, you can't write the whole of War and Peace, because you have to bear in mind your assessor has to go through it and actually still have a need to live after that. I'm being facetious now. But yes, so thank you for bringing that to my attention. I couldn't find it, but as I say, Miss Professor Carlett said that she has an open door policy. She would know. She also mentioned that a lot of these policies in the law faculty are being reviewed at the moment. So some of them are still perhaps under construction, but none of this will prejudice you guys in any way. So for minor dissertation, 8 to 10,000 words. If you are doing just a research proposal, I would imagine 20,000 words, and then your LLD 50 to 80. I don't know. I find that with most students, it's at the end they struggle. They write too much because really there's so much out there, and then they have to start cutting out. Then also regarding the LLD thesis, do you have any idea or estimate how long the examination process might take after formal submission? I will get to that if you don't mind. There are some slides on that, or at least a slide on that. Right, does that answer all the questions?
Yes, that's it.
Anything else?
We can proceed. Yes. Thank you, Doc.
Okay, no problem. Um, Right, structure of the proposal has to have a title. The title is quite important because it has to say what it's about. It doesn't have to be too long or too short. It doesn't have to. Catchy is nice, but you don't have to spend all your time trying to think of the most catchy title you can come up with. As long as it describes what you're doing, gives the area of law, it gives the case name, whatever it is what you are about. A description of the aims of the research, a description of the specific problems to be examined. Why are you doing this research? What are you examining? What area of law? What is the controversy? What is the lacuna? What is the contradiction, or what, what is new? Is it adequate, or whatever? A structure for the proposed research and an indication of the manner in which material will be arranged, some sort of outline. Are you going to start with historical developments, perhaps conflicting approaches, different elements in a statutory scheme, perhaps a cross-disciplinary approach, perhaps saying this is how different cases dealt with it, and then have a synthesis to say, well, what's the same in all these cases is that, and what's different in all these cases is this, and what do I think is better, or a critique of existing theories, or propose new approach, perhaps. Perhaps you will suggest that the law needs to be amended, or new law has to be introduced, or whatever the case may be. But what do you aim to do with this research? So even though it's not an original contribution, it must show adequate and a good understanding of what's out there already and where does it lead to. The stuff that's out there, you've looked at, you've critiqued, and where does it lead to? So it mustn't just be descriptive of what's out there, it must have been analyzed and then organized into a way that it gets you to a conclusion to say, then I have looked at these things, I've compared them, or I've analyzed them, or I've noticed that there are some gaps, etc., and therefore I conclude that this and this needs to be done. Those gaps need to be filled, or and the law needs to be amended so that the courts can't come to conflicting decisions, or whatever the case may be. A description of originality, I have mentioned for the master's, this is not an absolute requirement. For doctorate level, it is definitely a comprehensive review of the relevant literature. Now, remember, your proposal is not that long, so a maximum, I think, of 10 pages. So you don't have to do a little thesis already, but you must at least show that you know what is out there. You know this textbook is the leading textbook, or there's this expert writes many articles on this area of law, or the court has already given a number of cases on this aspect, or whatever. You have some sort of idea and grip on what's out there already, and that you're going to look at more fully. A comprehensive bibliography of what you have already looked at for the proposal. So your proposal has to have a bibliography. In the case of a dissertational thesis by means of articles, I would actually take this out if I had to edit my own slides, because we don't do a dissertation by means of articles in the law faculty. So let's ignore that. Then to break it down a little bit more, the title is registered by the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee. It can be changed if your studies take you in another way. Remember, your research is not linear. You're not going to sit down and start with chapter 1 or introduction and then finish at the end of November with conclusion. It just doesn't work that way. There are very few people that write like that. Your thinking is organic. It goes in all directions at all times, and your research will be organic. Everything you read this one might take you in this direction, and the next thing you read might take you in that direction. So it grows organically, and you need to then put it into some form or structure. So if you find that you're slightly going into a different direction, the focus is slightly different than what your title is now reflecting, it is possible to change the title, but it's not ideal. The title must be brief and concise. Redundancies, unnecessary phrases avoided. It must be clear and simple. Again, reference to dissertation by articles, let's ignore that. The introduction, a brief and clear introduction, set out the area of work and the key points of the proposal. Remember, your academic writing is not creative writing. You don't want to keep best for last. You want to have a big reveal at the end. the person who reads it wants to know right from the outset, what is this about? You know yourself when you research things and you pick up articles and or you get them online or whatever, you want to know in the first couple of sentences you read, what is this going to be about? Is this what you're looking for? Is it worth you reading this, etc.? You don't want to read through pages and pages and get to the conclusion and find out it was actually supposed to be about something else. You wasted your time. So you want to set out in your introduction, give an idea of what this is about, where is it going to. Literature review. This is a section setting out the existing literature in the field. It should be included in the proposal. The literature review should demonstrate a knowledge of this literature and show where his or her works fits into the literature. Are you going to critique it? Are you going to compare it? Are you going to build on it? Is there a new case that goes against the literature, or what the case may be? You're expected to critically engage with the literature as well as to indicate the issue. So not just a description, it's not just giving a praise-seed version, not just paraphrasing it, it's actually engaging with it. So reading it to say, well, I see it says this, but actually that case is that, or I see it says this, but the courts don't seem to interpret it like that, or whatever the case may be. What is most important is the proposal should be clear and logical and should seek to argue for, explain, and justify the research project, demonstrate its originality. Again, we don't have to speak about that, and show how the student intends to pursue it. So the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee, when they get the proposals, they want to see this is a good area, a good title, a good area of research. It's a valid area of research. It's not something that's been done over and over and over. It's perhaps something new, or it's perhaps something where there's a new case, or there's a new angle on it, or whatever. It must be worthy of research. Research objectives and research questions. So usually there's a clear statement of the general objectives, and as well as the specific questions. They may appear at different parts of the literature discussion or at the end. The research objectives generally refer to the major questions, the big questions, and the research questions are more specific. So you have big objectives and then small questions that come from that. You might just have one of each or whatever. Oh, what is your one research question? What little questions does it generate? But where are you going to spend most of your attention? Is it going to be on all the small little ones, or is it going to be the major big one, or whatever? The student might identify one major question and a number of minor ones. Alternatively, a student might identify 2 or 3 questions that he or she will explore without minor or sub-questions. So again, not cast in stone. The glass sentence, the dissertation by articles, these are in the policies but don't apply to us. Methodology explains the methods used in research. Most law theses and dissertations, not just at UJ, but South African universities and many international universities, consist of textual, archival, and desktop research, which means a review of existing publications or literature review, as opposed to empirical or quantitative studies. If the candidate wishes to conduct interviews or otherwise obtain information from human subjects, this needs to be discussed and justified in the proposal. Research of human subjects require approval from the University Research Ethics Committee. So noted. Bibliography, comprehensive bibliography of all the material candidate has cited must be provided. And this is in the proposal. Obviously, you don't know everything you're going to see in the months you are researching, but now for the proposal. The LLD candidates ultimately expected to have identified and read all major and relevant sources of his or her topic. At the proposal stage, the candidate has to at least indicate a familiarity with the major works on the topic. LLM, not as comprehensive as LLD. Sorry, I left out a sentence. Bibliography must be accurately and correctly recorded and organized in categories, books, articles, legislation, theses, or whatever. There are lots of examples out there. So notes on formatting, again, these are not set out in policies. but makes sense. And the ones that you see, go to the library, look through the theses, etc. Obviously, print only on one side of the page. Obviously, an A4 page. Left-hand margin, advisably 4 centimeters. It could be 2.5 either side, left and right. But if you want to allow for binding, they usually say 4 centimeters. Right-hand margin, 2.5. Again, you could do 2.5 either side if you wanted to. Text 12 point, and we usually say Times New Roman or Arial, something that is not too fancy, squiggly wiggly, no Comic Sans. It's difficult to read. That's the only thing. It just makes it easier to read and it looks professional, not a cursive, whatever. Spacing 1.5 for the text. For the footnotes, however, 10 point in the same font you used for the main body. So Times New Roman if you use Times New Roman in text. Sorry, Arial if you used Arial in the text, and single spaces for your footnotes. Indented quotes, if it's a quote longer than 3 lines or more. If you're just quoting a few words, then you don't have to put it separate and indented. But if you're quoting a little chunk and it's 3 lines or more, you're going to put it in its own paragraph, indent it, and then make it 10 point Times New Roman. Even though it's in the text, it just makes it stand out. And then you don't have to have quotation marks. You can, if you want, but you can leave them out if you do indent and put it in single spacing in its own little paragraph. Page numbers in the same font as the text. Usually your Word documents, I think, default to Calibri. So even though if you put your text to Times New Roman, your page number might be Calibri. So just make sure it's in the same format. Place the top right-hand corner. It's nowhere in a policy. You're not going to find this in a policy, but just make it easy to refer to, and also to remind yourself you have to have page numbers. Put your language check to English, South African English, not American English, so that you don't have humor, HUMOR, or whatever, and things like that. You don't want to lose mark for silly reasons. You don't want to have your assessor irritated because you've now got a bunch of American words, etc. So just, do what you can to make it easy to read, easy to understand. Your thoughts must be able to come across and not be hampered by any stylistic error. Right-hand margin, don't justify it. It's not something that's in a book, printed, so you leave it unjustified. If that offends your aesthetic values, you can justify it. You're not going to lose marks for that, but usually that's what they say. Think about this when you're writing. Consistency. Even if it's not perfect, it must be consistent. Don't do something on one page and on the next page do it differently. That is just shows sloppiness. So if you're not sure about something and you can't find out what the answer is, then take your best bet, but then at least be consistent with it. Use the correct style from the start, and at UJ it's the SAR style at the law faculty. Die tydskrif is Suid-Afrikaanse reg. So there are documents. If you just Google SAR style reference guide in Google, you're going to get a document that gives you that. But probably the best thing is to pick up a SAR itself, those green books you see in all the offices of the lecturers, or you go to the library, they have them all there, and you just keep an article close. Copy an article and keep an article close and see how the style is used. That's probably the easiest than going through and all the style guides. Add the footnotes from the outset. It may be difficult. You think you'll find the source again, but sometimes you just don't, and you just spend time where you don't need to. It's just a good habit to get into, a best practice if you want. Do not use a mix of style or fonts. This immediately looks to an assessor like plagiarism, or it looks like cut and paste, and it just stands out immediately. So just make sure, even if you are directly putting in a quote or something, just type it over so that there's no chance of it, so that it follows your formatting and your font, etc. Keep your bibliography updated from the start. Avoid citor's remorse. So you know there's a book but you just can't find it, or there's an article, or there's a thesis, or there's um, a website or whatever, and you just can't find it. Just make a note. These days it's so easy. You just copy your links and you paste it on your bibliography page or whatever. Just get into a habit. Use primary sources. You don't have to exclusively use them, obviously, but you have to have them there. So the original uninterpreted information, in other words, the law, legislation, the acts, the statutes, and the cases. Those are your primary sources for South African law. Your secondary sources, your textbooks, your journal articles, these interpret the primary sources, and then you obviously use them as well. Not all textbooks are good, but if you have a prominent textbook in an area, you would have to at least show that there is this prominent textbook that most people associate with this area of law or whatever. Be wary of just Googling and just accepting, because if it comes from an attorney's website, attorneys' websites have very useful information, but if you get a good idea from an attorney's website, go and look for the primary source. So your source, your authority is not that attorney's website, it's the actual law. So you would have to then go back and trace it back. Follow the grains of sand back to where the primary and even the secondary sources are. Write more notes on writing. A logical flow. Your supervisor might mention you must have a golden thread throughout your work. It must flow from one paragraph to the next, from one sentence to the next. It must be easy to read. You mustn't have an assessor go from one paragraph to the next and go, well, oh, okay, well, now we're on a different topic, it seems, or how does this tie in with what is above, or whatever. So make sure that you have that golden thread flowing through. Always keep your research question in mind and make sure what you write about is related to the research question, because as I say, your research is going to grow organically. It's going to go in all different directions. And if you're anything like me, you find yourself going down this rabbit hole of interesting things that you say, oh, that's interesting. And you read, and then at the end of the afternoon, you think, I'm now lost totally from where I started, but it was very interesting, or whatever. But just make sure that you go back to what is your research question and what is going to help you to answer that question. Then importantly, you might only cite a source if you have actually read or studied that source. You can't just fill up your bibliography with all kinds of sources if you haven't actually read all of them. That is in all academic studies the rule. Headings, just for TAST, I'll take note of the headings, chapter 1 in capital letters. Your first heading, introduction, would be in italics, and then all your subheadings just in normal sentence writing, so not capitals, etc. 1.1, don't put a 1 at the end, so just 1.1, 1.1, etc. Try not to break it down too much. You can use bullets if necessary, if absolutely necessary. Don't make everything bullets. These are not study notes. Because obviously read like an academic piece of writing. But if it makes more sense to put something, if it's a list of something, and it just makes more sense, it's the best way of expressing it. If it's in bullet form, you can use bullet, but don't default to bullets in your writing. So minimum, maximum time for a master's study. If it's full-time study, your minimum time is 1 year. You can't do a master's in less than 1 year. Your doctoral degree, 2 years minimum study. We did have someone, Marika Ruiz, she did hers in 2 years, but she had already almost worked it out by the time she'd done the proposal, etc. It was a very specific study on I don't know, there's something to do with weaponry, etc., etc. But 2 years minimum. What's the maximum full-time study for masters? Is 2 years, 24 months. If it's part-time, it's 3 years, and then doctoral studies 4 years and 60 months for part-time study, so 6 years. Um, so there are ways of asking the faculty higher degrees for extensions, etc., but don't bank on it. They usually do grant extra studies. Someone's pregnant or someone's sick or someone's whatever the case may be. There was COVID at one point and all kinds of things. So it's not absolutely this or nothing, but that is the general accepted time. These are the time periods. I know there's a question about the time period for assessment, and we still will get to that. So the study phase, again, you can see this comes from the policy. So structures providing support during supervision that can be utilized by the higher degree student. You is your supervisor, the Faculty of Law, who's the home department for you guys, the legal students, and then the UJ postgraduate school. So in the policy, it says those are your go-to people. Appointment of assessors. You don't appoint the assessors, but you do have to give your supervisor an indication you are almost near completion, so that you give the supervisor time, because there aren't enough assessors out there. There's just so many theses, etc. So you have to go sometimes hunting for assessors. If the ones you have, you can't make them assess your paper, but you phone your friend at Tux, or you've asked an acquaintance that you met at a conference at PE or whatever, and they say, oh, I'm so snowed under, I'm sorry, I can't help you now, or whatever. So you need time to appoint an assessor. As students near completion, the supervisor notifies the head of faculty administration. This used to be Paladi Mahonkhwa. She's now gone to executive, and they're waiting for the new dean, so the dean can appoint a new head of faculty administration. But there will be one. And there are people that do that function at the moment in the law faculty. But so either the faculty officer or the HAFA, or the head of faculty administration, will appoint assessors. And the student, ideally, but I suppose if it's a doctoral student, at least 4 months. There's no time really for a minor dissertation to give 4 months to some kind of, to appoint assessors. But just give some time so that the assessors can be appointed. The supervisor and the HOD agree on at least 2 assessors for a master's study and at least 3 for a doctoral study. If it's a minor dissertation or a research dissertation, they both require 2 assessors, but the minor dissertation, your assessors must be at least in possession of a master's degree in that particular discipline, and 1 must be outside of UJ. So you have 1 UJ assessor and 1 external assessor, so from any other university in South Africa. If it's a doctoral qualification, you need 3. One must be out of the country, and 2 must be in the country. But for let's just finish the masters. For research dissertation, at least 2 external assessors. So again, for masters, at least 1 with a doctoral qualification if it's a research masters. Whereas if it's a minors masters, at least the assessors must have master's qualifications. Again, this is not something you have to worry about. You wouldn't know the identity of your assessor necessarily. If the assessor indicates once they have assessed that they don't mind their name being made known to you, then it may be made known to you. You can ask, but only at the end, after the marks are in, etc. Submission should be in accordance with the final submission dates per semester contained in the university's year program. Late submissions could imply the renewal for registration and or not graduating on time. That's what the policy says. An abstract must go with your submission of no more than 1,000 words, describing the problem statement, the most important methods followed, the most important results obtained, and the summary of research outputs. You could do it in less than 2 pages. Most of them are perhaps 3/4 of a page, etc. but some form of abstract to say what this is about. And you know that your thesis is going to end up in the library repository, and people will online perhaps access it if they're interested. Perhaps they're doing a search, and your title comes up. Then the person looking at it wants to see what is this about. Is it something that will be relevant to their research? And they want to see from the abstract, how was this approached, what was looked at, what was the conclusion reached, etc. The candidate is responsible for ensuring that the thesis is of the required technical and language quality required by the supervisor. Before submission, we have discussed that. Faculties decide and communicate to students as to how the assessment copies are submitted. So Tim Bakasi there is technically your go-to person, will say you'll need to submit it electronically. It has to go through Turnitin first. You need that Turnitin report, and the supervisor will say, yes, it's a bit high, but there's many sources that Turnitin has identified. So it's not that the student has just copied major from one source or whatever, some sort of interpretation of the Turnitin. There's no specific Turnitin percentage that's acceptable or not, but obviously you're going to aim for the lowest Turnitin one you can manage. So reference and all your things with footnotes, etc. So submission, all electronic documents should be done in high resolution. The printing of the copies, if it's needed, must be on high quality paper. All text and graphical material, if you, for instance, have graphs or images or whatever that are relevant to your studies, this should be prepared for upload to the university's institutional repository. It goes on to open access. The candidate must submit the following to the faculty officer: copies of the thesis as an encrypted PDF document, and the encryption shared with assessors. I don't know if the Makazi requires this. I would leave it up to her to indicate to you what is the necessary way, but it would be a PDF that's electronically submitted. If necessary, a number of ring-bound copies equal to the number of assessors should be submitted. I'll leave that up to Tim Bakasi. This is just an example of a front page, and you have so many examples of that. You can find many to follow. You see that you would have your title, you would have your name, submitted in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree Magister Legum, LLM, in corporate law at the University of Johannesburg, supervisor, date. So you will easily find examples there. You will have an affidavit that you need to assign. That will be your second or third or fourth page, however you put it together on your thesis, to say I haven't plagiarized, etc. Again, you'll see examples of that. Submission. So permission to submit, very important. You cannot submit directly to Tembakazi without the supervisor saying you're allowed to submit. So the supervisor will usually send Tembakazi, either send the dissertation or say to Tembakazi that I have spoken to the student and they are ready to submit. So that Tembakazi knows when this report comes, when this thesis comes through, it's with the permission of the supervisor. So the policy says no research report, minor dissertation, or thesis may be submitted for final assessment without the explicit written permission of the supervisor. Where the supervisor withholds permission without reason, due processes must be followed. And remember, I said you approach the HOD, the vice dean, the executive dean, if necessary postgrad. If necessary postgrad can refer to the Senate Higher Degrees Committee. An affidavit confirming that the work is the candidate's own and that all sources used have been duly acknowledged and copyright approval has been obtained where applicable. Affidavit must also state that the study has not been submitted to another institution as part of the requirements. That's document I just copied and pasted there. You must submit it to Turnitin or something similar, and evidence must be provided. So obviously the Turnitin report and a suitable interpretation by the supervisor. If it's perhaps slightly higher and supervisor says no, that's okay in the circumstances and this is the reason or whatever, then it will still be acceptable. Again, there's not a percentage limit that you have to be under. Supervisors should take reasonable steps and also make sure that it goes through something like Turnitin. To assessors. Okay, so the assessors are formally appointed, and if the Faculty High Degrees Committee will make a note of that, the documentation to the higher degree, to the faculty's officer. Paladi used to be sent to the assessor by the faculty officer. So Tembakazi is the faculty officer. She is the one that sends to assessors, etc. She appoints them, sends the letter of appointment to them once the faculty administrator has okayed it. There we go, is the answer to the question we had in the chat. Assessors are granted 6 weeks for a doctoral thesis, 5 weeks for a master's dissertation if it's a research dissertation, and 4 weeks for a minor dissertation. So there's no reason why there's a capital T. It's just my typing. In the middle there, apologies. So 4 weeks, a month after it's been given to the assessor. In many instances, they will do it before that, but if they're very busy, they will need the full 4 weeks, and they return it with a completed assessment form, a narrative report, and if the assessor has made corrections on the actual manuscript, then they will return the manuscript and that will be given to you. They don't return it to you directly, they return it to the faculty officer. The faculty officer sends it to the supervisor and the supervisor sends it to the student and says, this is what the assessor says. You'll note that there are some corrections or whatever. So if it has been given perhaps at the end of January, that will be the end of February, but that will still be time for it to go through the faculty high degrees, so that everything can be ready for April graduation. The documents must be accompanied by a cover letter from the faculty, and obviously you don't have to worry about that. That all gets done. The covering letter gives a sentence. It's not something you need to stress about, but it does say the fact that we're sending it doesn't mean that we think it's something that should be passed, basically. It says, please note that no inference as to the result expected by the university can or should be drawn from the fact that a minor dissertation is submitted to an assessor for assessment. So it just says the fact that we're sending this to you to be assessed doesn't mean that we are of the opinion the student must pass, basically. The faculty administrator or the faculty officer has to ensure that the assessor's reports are received timeously. So don't worry, that gets done, and must follow up on the reports if they're outstanding. Sound communication should be maintained between the faculty office and the students, the supervisors, the assessors. So you will be kept in the loop if something's perhaps late, to say following it up, don't stress or whatever. The faculty officer or the faculty administrator or both compiles the reports, because remember now, for if it's a minor dissertation or research dissertation, there are two. So they might have different marks and they submit it to the supervisor. The supervisor shares the reports to the students, and if there are corrections, will advise the students of those corrections, and ensuring that all details about the identity and affiliations of what university they belong to are removed from the material shared with the student. Under no circumstances may the identity of the assessor be made known to the student, and where the assessor has indicated that they don't mind sharing their identity, this may only be done once assessment is complete, usually when Senate Higher Degrees has endorsed the final income, so right at the end. The supervisor or student may not communicate with the assessor during the assessment process. So possible outcomes, and there are a couple of slides on this, so it might be repetition. So what can an assessor, what feedback can they give? First of all, is the best one. It's the one we want, and it's approval. and no correction need be made, and a mark of 50 or more, whatever, 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever. That's one option. The other option, provisionally approve, say, I will give a mark of 60 or I will give a mark of 70, but minor corrections need to be made. And these corrections need to be done to the satisfaction of the supervisor. So it means that that thesis doesn't have to be resubmitted to that assessor. The corrections are done, and then you submit it back to your supervisor, and then the supervisor gives a letter to the faculty officer to say, I've looked at the corrections and I can confirm that they've all been done. And then the mark will be given. The third option, substantial amendments. So no mark is given at this stage. They say you substantially need to amend this in this way and that way. No mark is given, but it has to be resubmitted to the assessor. And then the assessor can at that stage pass or fail it, but hopefully will pass it. The policy says the final mark is capped at 50% if you resubmit, but the law faculty usually does not follow that example. So with resubmitted documents, even with major revisions like this, you will get the mark that the assessor gives. It won't be capped by the faculty at 50%. Then the worst one, the absolute one we want to avoid is rejection, to say this is not up to master's level, it cannot be rescued by means of any amendments, minor or major, and it's less than 50%, and no reassessment by that assessor will take place. So this is a repetition, and I think this is from the policy. So let's not say the same thing. What can the faculty do? You see both assessors recommend a mark of at least 50%, or obviously and higher. If there's a difference of less than 15% between the two assessors, the faculty will average the marks. So if one assessor said, whatever, 73, one assessor said 60 and another assessor said 70, then your mark will be 75. The faculty may also consider adjusting marks from 73 or 74 to 75 to give you a first, or 63, 64 to 65. So those are options that the university policies make allowance for. If both assessors, this is number 2, recommends a mark of at least 50% and the difference is more than 15%, then the options in the policies are that the faculty can appoint a third assessor and then take the third assessor's mark with the first assessor's mark, or the faculty can appoint an arbitrator, which they don't usually do, usually a third assessor, or they can facilitate further discussion. So there are options there. If both assessors recommend a reassessment, then the student revises and resubmits to the assessors, obviously, not just minor supervision to be given to the supervisor and the supervisor to confirm that these have been done. Then the marks of the 2 reassessments are capped at 50%. The policy says, but as I say, this is up to the faculty. Prof. Collins advises that they give the student the mark that the assessors give. But if you have any queries in this regard, please discuss with her. And then number 4, one of the assessors recommends a fail, while the other one recommends a mark of 50 or more, or a reassessment. Appoint an additional assessor, appoint an arbitrator, etc. So you can see the policies deal with all these eventualities. It's not made up as it goes along. It is very much dealt with and followed, etc. These I'm going to skip over that because it basically says the same thing. You'll get the slides, And you can then, if you want to go over that, you can even consult the policies. They're all available online on the UJ website, or even if you just Google UJ High Degrees Administration Policy, it'll pop up. Just make sure you see the latest one, because they do obviously get renewed and revised. Oral evidence. This relates to students that are doing doctorates. So since 2024, following a doctorate examination, faculties must ensure that the compulsory defense of viva voce, so an oral defense of your thesis, takes place. It's in front of a panel, so it's the doctoral candidate, a chair. It's called a non-assessing chair. It's just a person that chairs the meeting, but that person doesn't give a mark, so a non-assessing chair, and at least 2, but preferably 3 assessors. The supervisor is there for some of the time at least. And the supervisor may be invited to offer viewpoints or clarifications, or to support the student, etc. The non-assessing chair, you can just, the chair meets with the assessors before to explain the approach, explain outlines. So the chair obviously has sight of the assessors' reports, and there might be common themes or problems or whatever, and this is highlighted. The doctoral candidate will be required to provide a brief outline of their study and to highlight the main findings or conclusions. Can either be done orally, or you can do a PowerPoint, or whatever you think will bring across your point. Following the presentation, there's some questions to the student. Are you the author of the work? What do you mean by this, or what's intended by that? Confirm whether the work is acceptable. In other words, we'll ask questions and see that this student actually wrote this, does know what it's about, etc. Allow the student to reply to any concerns that the examiners may have had, the assessors may have had, and if they have their own interesting questions that they want to ask, they might ask that to the student. Are you going to do further studies? Where are you going with this? Or whatever, for guidance and advice for further development of the work. The oral evidence, 60 to 90 minutes, hour to hour and a half, can bring material, etc. So just to make you aware, if you are doing a doctorate, you're going to have to defend that by means of an oral evidence. The person leaves the room, the student, and the supervisor can remain to answer questions. The chair facilitates a discussion, then the supervisor also leaves, and there's a final report signed by all the assessors. It goes to the faculty office, that the faculty office sends it to the faculty higher degrees, and as you've guessed, it ends up at the Senate higher degrees. Publications from the thesis. For masters, 1 publication. For doctoral studies, at least 2 publications. However, before you have a little heart attack and say, oh, I didn't know about this, it must be at least 1 piece of work in a format suitable for submission to a journal, so a DHET accredited peer-reviewed journal or publication. So it mustn't actually have been published already. And even though this has not been strictly enforced, Prof. Khalid says that this is something the law faculty is going to enforce. So that will be discussed with you if it affects your cohort, but it is 1 for masters, 2 for doctoral studies, and it must be something that you've got something that can be an article. Might be a chapter of your study, etc. I talk about chapters. It's not always necessary for a minor dissertation to be in chapters. You can actually just let it flow from the beginning to the end if that's your choice. There's also no requirements as to that. If you're a person that likes things to be set out nicely and you want a chapter 1 and 2, you can also do that format as long as it follows clearly. So, final assessment. The faculty higher degrees committee meets and they make sure everything is in order and all the I's have dots and all the T's have crosses, and etc. The doctorate results serve at faculty board for recommendation and at the Senate Higher Degree Committee. You have to submit an electronic copy. The whole point of this is there must be something to upload in the library repository so that all the research is captured in the library repository, which is open access and can be accessed by other researchers. And then a doctoral study must also submit an abbreviated biography and a laudation. That's that thing that's read out when you go to graduations and they're doctoral students and they read out a little summary of that study. So that's what the doctoral study student must provide before the graduation. I almost think that's the end. I think this is my last slide. Take heart. Don't be in any way disheartened or put off. Careful research takes time. It's not going to be linear. It's not going to be flowing from your pen unless you're very lucky. It's full of false starts, detours, unexpected discoveries, new insights, and rethinking. Research is not linear. It's dynamic and recursive. It turns back on itself all the time, grows organically, needs to be put into a thematic framework. It doesn't automatically land there. Be prepared to read, reread, rethink, rework, and most of all, a very, very good luck to all of you with your studies. Thank you. That's the conclusion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Javed, for that very insightful and inspirational workshop on thesis format and submission procedures. Really do appreciate that, and I'm sure all the students that are here today will definitely take points that they will incorporate in their research, as we are all in different parts or stages of our research, but I'm sure this will definitely come in handy in preparation or in completion of your research. In that regard, we can open the floor to question. We can just term it as open discussion. If you have any question for Dr. Joubert, you can go ahead. I've allowed everybody's mic, so you can kindly raise your hand and ask away. I also saw there was a question in the chat, but I don't know if you want to reiterate the what is it? Shaked. How likely is each option to be given? I don't know if you want to clarify on that. Maybe I might have missed that day in the chat, but I see there is a hand up by Nkulego. You can unmute your mic and go ahead.
Thank you, Lawrence. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Doc, can you hear him?
I can hear. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. You can go ahead.
Thank you. And also thank you to Dr. Joubert for the presentation. There is a lot that you would think you knew already until you sit in one of these sessions and you discover how much you don't know. So thank you so much for the presentation. So you've addressed some of my main concerns during the presentation in relation to the length of the LLD thesis between 50,000 and 80,000 words, as well as the length of the examination. Yeah, so I remember you said it was 6 weeks that it would be sitting with the assessors. But maybe I should have been more direct in relation to that question, to say from the moment that you submit to Tembekazi and your supervisor approves it, what exactly would be an ideal time frame? Because I know that in addition to that 6 weeks, there might still be time where it needs to go to the Faculty High Degrees Committee for approval. There might still be a lot of administrative work that needs to be done before you actually are approved for graduation, right? And so, that's just one question, which is a follow-up on the 6 week that you've said before. I don't know if maybe because maybe you might not really know about all of the administrative processes and the timeframes, but maybe if you do know, have information on that, you can share. And then the second part of my question is in is in relation to the oral defense. So there are the various options in terms of the outcomes that your thesis could have after the assessors have read it. So they can approve it with minor amendments and so on and so on. And I'm just trying to understand what exactly is the connection then between that part of the assessment as well as the oral defense. So do they read it first and then approve it with minor amendments and then the oral defense comes after? Or is it like a two-part where they have to read it first and they come for the oral defense, and then after the oral defense, that is when they give the result of whether approved without changes or approved with minor changes or so on and so on. So I'm trying to understand the connection between the two components of the critical reading and then as well as the oral defense, if you do have information on that. Thank you.
Okay, Khululeka, I'm going to try and answer. So your first question, I would imagine 6 weeks would only be with the assessor. It obviously depends also on the time frame. So if it's over December, then the faculty doesn't sit or anything. So, they'll only sort of start in early January. The admin staff comes back at the faculty and they will then, send it off to assessors and whatever, give them the 6 weeks and it comes back. Then say, for instance, you have to make minor amendments and your supervisor gives you 2 weeks to make the minor amendments, resubmit back to the assessor. Then, so that's already now 8 weeks. And then the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee typically only sits a few times a year. They can't sit every week. So you might have to wait 2 or 3 weeks for that. So that's 8 weeks, 12 weeks. I would say 3 months, typically, but, the faculty works around their graduation dates as well. So they obviously would like to get things finalized and as many students as they can, because it's in their interest to have their students graduate. So they would then, have meetings and stuff and make sure that things go through and are discussed in time for a graduation, be it April or August. So they don't want to also unnecessarily push things up because it's just another file or another thing that's lying there, that could have been attended to. So I would say just as a thumbs up from me, 3 months, but obviously they try and streamline the process as much as possible. Then the second question relating to the oral defense, the oral defense will only happen once the faculty higher degrees has decided on what to do with the mark. So they would already have worked out the mark, whether they give an aggregate or whether they appoint an extra assessor or whatever. That process, as I understand it, will already have taken place. And then the oral defense is just to make sure that this is your work, that you know the work, and that they can give you that mark. If there's something extraordinary, then I would imagine they would then, say, but hang on, something's wrong, here. I don't know whether we can give this mark. But this, I say, under correction. So I would suggest if you still have any further queries about that, take it up with Prof. Coates. And just bear in mind that oral defense is, although it's been in the policies forever and a day, it's something the law faculty has only started since 2024. So I know they have in 2024 there were oral defenses, but it's not something that I know a lot about at this stage. Does that answer your queries in any way?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jubel, for clarifying on those questions. Is there any other question? Shaked, I think, would you like to unmute your mic and maybe clarify your question? As I recall, you did type in a question which says, how likely is each option to be given? And then you said it was in the reference to the assessor's options. So I wouldn't know what options. That's what I'm saying. Can you please just clarify on that question there? Or are there any
If I
other?
can interject, I don't know if Kafia is referring to, how often does an assessor give a mark without any requirement for amendments, or how often does an assessor give a mark with major assess? That's impossible to answer because it totally depends on that piece of work and that assessor. Um, it's that's impossible to say how likely it is. Um, Very often you get reports back from assessors to say, 85% or whatever, or seldom you get that high, but say 75% or 74 or whatever, or 70% with a few minor alterations. So there might be a typo, or they might have referred to the act incorrectly, or whatever, or a few minor things like that. That's really not, there's no need to resubmit that thesis to the assessor. There's just some minor things that need to be sorted out. So that happens quite often. But then again, there are also times where the assessor says, I don't think this is on master's level in its current format because it doesn't refer to these major resources that, are very topical on this um, area of the law or whatever, and then you'll have to work in those resources and then resubmit it to the assessor. And even though initially your heart sinks and you think, well, oh, this is not good enough or whatever, actually it's a good thing because the assessor is acting like a second supervisor almost, because the assessor perhaps knows more about the topic or has seen something that the supervisor hasn't seen, and the assessor is then giving you tips on how to make this thesis of yours better. So at the end of the day, it's your name that's on that thesis. And if someone else reads it in the future, you want it to be good. So if the assessor says, I'll give you this mark, I'll give you 68, but only if you look at this case or refer to this source or whatever, and it might be more than one recommendation, or your conclusion should be reworked, or whatever, or the recommendation you make is not viable, it's not going to work, or whatever, and then you answer that. And at the end of the day, your thesis is better. It's more sound, it's more complete, and so take it as a good thing. The absolute worst, and there's no comeback from, is if your thesis is rejected. And although it does happen, these are really just instances where that thesis really should not actually have been submitted for approval. And then why does the supervisor send it? Well, it might be that the student insists, or it might be that it's borderline. And even though the supervisor doesn't want to send it, because you as a supervisor also don't want your name, because your name is on that thing. You saw that example I included in my slides. It's my name on there, supervisor eventually. I don't want to send something if the assessor is going to say this should be rejected. But say the students is insistent, and they say, but I've done a lot of work on it and I believe, or whatever, whatever. And you think, oh, okay, it's on your head then. And it comes back. And luckily for me, in my instance, when that happened, it was 53% for the one assessor, and the other assessor gave it 57 or whatever. So it ended up like a 55. But it's not a tightrope you want to walk. So in any event, but that is the absolute worst if it's rejected. So anything with recommendations, really not the end of the world. You can work around it.
Thank you so much there, Doc, for clarifying on that. I think he's been answered there. Thank you so much. In that regard, is there any other question? Any other question from the participants, or maybe something that you need clarification on? You can raise your hand before we can end the session. just as you're thinking about the questions there, I have posted a feedback survey as I have mentioned at the beginning of this session. So please kindly fill in this feedback survey as we use this for our reporting purposes. And also this feedback survey will be sent to our facilitator as well. And also this will also allow us to send you a certificate of attendance for this workshop. So kindly please fill it out, and also please ensure that your emails and all the details that are included in the feedback surveys are correct so that we can correctly insert them on the certificate of attendance for this particular workshop. I see there is a hand raised by Ricardo. You can unmute your mic and speak.
Oh, good evening. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear him, Doc?
I can hear you, Ricardo.
Yes, I can hear you. So. Yes, I just joined actually a few hours ago, so I don't know if I will able to access if the recording, so the presentation was recorded, if I can able to access it so that I can get the information which was discussed before.
Yes, the session was being recorded, and we will post all the resources on our model communities, but also, pardon? We will post all the resources on our model communities. If you are not enrolled on our model communities, please kindly email us at RCD inquiries. So I will put up the email in the chat. So it's rcdinquiries@uj.ac.za, and we will be able to assist you further regarding that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so I have just typed in the email in the chat box. Okay, I see there is another hand raised by Asanda. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Just a quick one. After submitting the SRF, is a natural step to be accepted conditionally, or if you are accepted conditionally, is because you are not meeting certain requirements? This is for LLD.
For LLD, what is an SRF? Just enlighten me.
It's a form, a document that you would submit to outline your research focus. It's quite a brief document, and they also ask you if you already have a supervisor or not in that.
I see. And the response you got was accepted with conditionally.
Conditions, but the conditions have not been stipulated on the letter.
I suggest you take that up with your HOD or the program director. What area of law is it? Is it commercial law?
No, private.
Private law.
Yes.
Yeah, I would take that up with Dr. Farnaz Khan.
Farnaz Khan, okay.
Is she not the HOD for private law?
I'm not sure, ma'am.
Okay, but go then to, there's no faculty office at the moment, but go to Tembakazi and ask, who can I take this? Because you need to have it clarified. The thing is that you don't want to sit there and stress and worry. You want to just have an open mind to research. So if there are things like that that are stressing you out, go to the faculty and find out. Or send her an email. I did give her email address and say, please, who can I clarify this with? And they will show you the correct person, but don't leave it, because it's just going to stress you out, and that's not necessary. You don't want to have administrative things that can be clarified. Take up your time.
Thank you so much for that.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions from the participants? Okay, in that regard, I don't see any other questions from the chat box. I don't see any hands raised. So in that regard, we will now be ending the session. So once again, I would like to thank you, Dr. Jobet, for taking your time to facilitate this very important thesis format and submission procedure from the Faculty of Law. We really appreciate you so much here, the Research Capacity Development, for taking your time to facilitate and give us all the insights. And thank you to all the participants as well for taking your time to join. I hope you have learned a thing or two that you will definitely be incorporating in your research. In that regard, I will be ending the session, and also please kindly Just a reminder to fill in the feedback survey as well, as I have posted it in the chat. In that regard, I will now be ending the session. Is there anything further that you'd like to add, Dr. Jobed, before I
Not
end?
from my side, just to thank everyone who attended and to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Okay, not a problem, Doc. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All of
Okay.
you
Bye-bye.
too. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you. Bye. All right.